Local, for those of you that don't know, is a bit of an odd one. We co-owned by Kirklees Council up in not very sunny Huddersfield in West Yorkshire. I've been around for 20 years, and we typically build digital products where there is some kind of market failure. And we've been doing that for 20 years and provided all sorts of different products to local authorities up and down the country over the last 20 years. Certainly, I think well over 100 of local authorities have used Looking Local products from time to time.
And I'll just start again.
I think someone might have a bit of noises off in the background there.
Yeah.
Can I suggest if folks mute and then just stick your hand up, please just ask questions as we go today. Now, the context of the setup of this call and this session was around the care cap account. And of course, a couple of things have changed in the last week or two. Not least, Jeremy Hunt stood up and kicked the care reforms down the road a couple of years. It hasn't really changed much, though, if truth be told, in terms of what the challenge is that certainly we've been involved in helping to address Looking Local, and the work that we've been doing with 5 councils around what was originally focused on the care cap account actually is still trucking forwards, because the care cap account bit was just that's the easy bit, to be honest. There was a whole bunch of other aspects to what the work that we were doing that were important. So underpinning all of this demonstration are 2 products that Looking Local have been responsible for developing, which I'm going to show you today. One of them is called Better Care Finance. That is a digital self-led financial assessment, which is quite different to anything else that was on the market and remains different to anything that's on the market today. And its sister product called Better Care Support, which is a digital strength-based self-led care and support assessment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen and take you through it and show you. I've got Bart on the call, who is with us from Looking Local today. He can pick up on any questions, will interrupt me if needs be, because I probably may not spot hands up and so on as we go. I think that should be sharing okay, so I'm just going to bring that up and then and off we go. Okay, so financial assessments within adult social care. Back in 2016, 2017, Kirklees Council had some real problems, big problems on this front, and they asked Looking Local to come into the council and see how they were delivering their financial assessments and their care and support assessments. I'll start with the financial assessments first. So the story for them at the time was that it was taking them on average 100 days to complete a financial assessment in elapsed time. They had a huge backlog of 650 cases that they could never quite shift. A really significant number of care packages that they were providing and setting up were failing, 25%. And the reason for that, the principal reason for that, is that they were putting a package of care in place that would take them so long to complete the financial assessment piece that by the time they turned around to somebody 3 or 4 months down the line and said, okay, your contribution, we need you to contribute X towards your care, they would say, well, I'm not paying that. And the package would fail. That would lead to significant debt, 6.5 million on average per year Kirklees had, and really unhappy service users, unhappy staff. The whole thing was broken. And that picture, we've been working now with a lot of councils around the country around the same problem, and it's the same picture. I'll come on to care and support assessments and that figure of £620 a little bit later. But the bottom line is they had a problem. But what they did not want to do was to address this in a kind of half-assed way digitally. There are products out there on the market that will do a kind of ready reckoner that will determine whether or not someone is below or above the capital threshold. But ultimately, there was nothing, and there remains nothing else on the market that enables the user to provide all the information that's required from them, and in real time get a pound and pence figure that is shrink wrapped around each the local authorities' rules and policies that, of course, are very local. It would be great, and in fact, it would make a considerable amount of sense if there was simply a national model for financial assessments for care, but there isn't. Every local authority has to consult locally with their population to find out, they can get their input on the way that they adopt their own policies and rules and how they calculate that pound and pence figure. So what Kirklees did not want was a ready reckoner. They didn't want something that did a bit of it, but then left the financial assessment staff still needed to do all the heavy lifting on the maths. They wanted the user to go through a digital experience and at the end of it, get that pound and pence figure. That's what Better Care Finance does. And in order to do that, there are some kind of core principles that we had to apply to the way that we built a product here. And I'll talk a bit about the bespoke calculations there, but there are also, I don't know how, in terms of the audience, I think this is quite an IT orientated audience, but I know there's some folks from social care too. But there, ultimately, you have care types as well. It's not just the getting that pound and pence right, but you've got to do it for res, non-res, respite care types, and each council does care types slightly differently. So the challenge was, could we build a product that could be shrink wrapped around each local authority's rules and policies and the way they approach care types? So at Looking Local, we're obsessed with content. And what we've learned from the last 6 years of implementing Better Care Finance is that if you want the user to provide the information correctly, you have to really carefully construct the content that sits alongside the form. It's not just about knocking up a form and doing some maths. It's about providing the content and support that helps them understand topics that are actually quite complex and difficult for them to understand. So that kind of user-centered design and focus on content, you'll see a big part of when I show it to you. The mobile first development, we know that people are using any and all devices these days. So an elegant and seamless ability to be able to pick up your laptop, move to a tablet or a mobile phone and be able to access this as a product wherever and however you like, and to be able to switch across those different sort of platforms and technologies is absolutely essential. And the Care Act and compliance around this, there are safeguarding safety nets built into this that help flag people who perhaps have stopped going through the process where they really need to be encouraged to complete it. But there are also obligations for all councils under the Care Act around income maximisation. And what that means is helping someone understand what they might be entitled to and then encouraging them and providing them with the tools and technology to actually apply for benefits they may be entitled to. And in the context of adult social care, something like attendance allowance is super important, but it's an awful process. So that's provided as a PDF from DWP. So we've digitized the whole thing. We have an income max module that sits alongside Better Care Finance, which I'll briefly show to you, and it enables someone to work out what they're entitled to and then carries them through the process of applying for those benefits, but importantly allows you as a council to measure that. Now, Kirklees, for them, that was absolutely essential. They wanted to know what the actual monetary gain was in the local economy from people being able to apply for the benefits they're entitled to. And in the current cost of living crisis, the income maximisation piece within Better Care Finance couldn't be more important. A few key features around it. Looking Local, we do a lot of animation. We've become quite good at it. And we've learned that it's a great way of being able to convey complex, difficult topics in ways that people can really understand. And the Local Government Association, the LGA, were working with us and Lincolnshire on their implementation of Better Care Finance a couple of years ago. and they decided they'd put some additional funding in to underwrite 20 animations that you'll see are placed right across the whole user experience and bring to life topics that are difficult for people to understand. And I'll play one of those, one around deprivation of assets, which most people wouldn't have a clue what that means. It's important though in the context of a financial assessment, and there's an animation that helps someone understand it. They're all the kind of text and email reminders you'd expect, but one of the challenges for local authorities around financial assessments is evidence and chasing that evidence. Better Care Finance does all of that. For Kirklees and for many councils still, they still need in some cases to undertake financial assessment in someone's home. But connectivity is not always guaranteed, so this product can work completely offline and then resyncs. One of the most important features of both Better Care Finance and Better Care Support is advocacy use. So not everybody can do this for themselves. You'd be surprised just how many can, and I'll come on to the stats in a second. But some people can't, and they need help. But what we don't want to do when we're helping someone and using a digital experience is to sort of take them offline. We want to keep them there. We want to give them the tools to enable them to be helped digitally. So we've built and gone very carefully constructed capabilities within Better Care Finance and Better Care Support that allows friends, family, or council staff to join someone in real time in the form digitally and help them complete any part of the form that they are struggling with all of the right controls in place from an information governance and information security perspective. I mentioned evidence earlier. One of the things that takes councils an enormous amount of time and effort and resource is chasing evidence. Within Better Care Finance, someone is completing all the information about their circumstances, and when we onboard a local authority in using this, we go to the very finest level of detail to understand precisely which fields trigger what requirements around evidence. And what that means is that when someone gets to the end of the process and submits it, they're given a personalised prescription of evidence that is specific to their circumstances. It says, these are the 6 things we need from you, and gives them tools to upload all of those. And I'll come on to integration in a second. It's all then delivered onto your back office network. For those of you familiar with financial assessments, there is all sorts of fun and games around annual bulk uplift and also around changing circumstances. That's all covered within Better Care Finance, the ability to be able to clone or copy a previous assessment and then make a small change, resubmit, do all the maths in real time, all part and parcel of the product. There's the income max I've already spoken to briefly. The integration piece I mentioned on this slide, we are formally part of the Access Group Partnership Programme for Mosaic. So I know there are a number of councils on the call today who are Mosaic customers. We are totally agnostic. We don't care what system, back office system, adult social care system that you use. Kirklees Council are currently Care First. They're moving to Mosaic. I know there are folks with Liquid Logic and Controc, OLM and so on. I think actually if there's someone from Newham on board, I think here today, you've got Azus. We don't care. Our philosophy on integration is that these are modern systems. They should talk to each other and there should be no costs associated with integration. So from our perspective, integration is a given and there's no costs that go with that. If folks don't want to ask any specifics on that, we'll come on to integration because I know it's possibly an important part of the whole story. What are the outcomes from all of this? Well, at Kirklees and at numerous other councils, if you don't have Better Care Finance, almost certainly right now you are taking phone calls or you're sending out paper forms where all of this information has to be collected, and then someone has to enter it into a system. They have to do the maths. They have to understand how you're doing the or your disability related expenses and so on. All of that you have to do for yourselves. At Kirklees and all the others who are using Better Care Finance, 100% are done self-service through Better Care Finance. So I should qualify that. The advocacy support piece. So at Kirklees, 90%, over 90% of all financial assessments are done completely by by the service users. Somewhere between just under 10% need a bit of help, and that's where the advocacy feature comes in. At Kirklees, they used to do a lot of home, it was almost all home visits. It's well below 2% now. That 25% fail care package, which is that's where it really costs councils, really does. That's gone from 25% and is now 12% and falling. On average, Kirklees have managed to recover £1.4 million of additional debt every year since 2017, because the amount of time this has freed up from for their financial assessment officer staff time has allowed them to pivot and focus on debt collection. And those are real hard numbers in the current context and the current climate. That's really important. They have zero backlog. Almost every council I speak to at the moment says they're struggling to recruit financial assessment officers. And in many cases, they have big backlogs where you shifted people to a completely and a proper self-service experience, your backlog disappears. And that allows the staff to focus on the complex and vulnerable cases where their input and involvement is so much more valuable. So that's Better Care Finance and its background. There's some of the customers, local authorities who either have signed up to Better Care Finance. I know recently in London, Hackney are just in the process of, or just started the onboarding for them. Ealing, we start on the 1st of January. But yeah, there are many councils who are using Better Care Finance today or in the process of being onboarded with that. So what I was going to do now is briefly show it to you. Are there any questions at this stage, Bart, that I need to address?
No, not yet.
Cool.
You're okay to continue. Oh, actually, we got one from Victor.
Yeah, Victor.
Yeah, hi there. I'm going to ask a little bit awkward question on integrations. I know you have an integration with Mosaic right now, but Access Group have certainly not been, shall we say, always very supportive of third-party integrations to their systems.
Mm-hmm.
So what's your agreement with them like? Do you expect to be able to continue having the product integrate, or is there a risk there of having that break at some point in the future?
Well,
sorry, it's not a question.
No, it's fine. Is there anyone Access Group on this call just while I speak? I don't think there is. So Steve Whiteman, who's the MD there, is committed to being open. Now, it's interesting that Looking Local is co-owned by Kirklees Council. Kirklees Council, completely separately from Looking Local, decided to procure Mosaic and included in their contract is integration with Better Care Finance. So whilst I would agree that working with Access Group isn't easy, for those reasons, I mean, we have a contract in place with them, and I'm confident that that will continue. Some of their technology isn't great, and it's painful to work with, but we're getting there. We had the similar conversation with OLM Group, who've approached us. They want us to be their kind of strategic partner for financial assessments. Controc a little bit more cagey. However, we're looking at using, because in some cases, we take Mosaic or Access Group customers. There are still quite a few customers who have Abacus, which is an ancient technology. Warwickshire and Herefordshire, we're just working with them on a robotic process automation RPA approach to getting the data out of the submitted assessments and into their billing systems. So there are numerous ways to achieve that. We also, one of the things that we do for quite a lot of councils is to deliver the data. So integration of Better Care Finance and Better Care Support happens on two levels. There's a human version of the world, which is a PDF, but there's also a machine readable version, which is JSON. And we can either deliver that via SFTP directly onto your network, or we use an S3 bucket from AWS which you can poll and draw the data down securely and then run scripts to extract the data that you need. In most cases, say for example, for integration with Mosaic, there's only about 16 data fields that are actually required for the billing process. So it's those 16 that are then mapped into a Mo form within Mosaic that then can be pushed into the billing process. So there are lots of ways to skin the integration cat, if you like. But does that answer your question, Victor, in terms of?
Yeah.
Is that, yeah.
Yeah, it does cover it. Thank you. And I'm especially interested to hear that you're using RPA in cases where you've not been able to get better solutions in place. So that's very helpful. Thank you.
I find it hugely frustrating, and I'm sure many of you do too, about it. And Access Group are just like the rest, as far as I can see. Their willingness to be open, it seems to me bizarre in this day and age, because actually they were more open, it would probably make their underlying technology more sticky, because no one's great at everything. There are lots of different organizations that have great solutions to specific problems. This is, we think, by far and away the best solution to financial assessments that's available. In fact, we think it's the only one that's properly available for self-service. But we don't do, we don't build a full adult social care back office system. That kind of monolithic approach, I think, is the old-fashioned way of doing things, and it tends to lead to. I don't yet come across a council that says, I love our back office adult social care system, and I think that's one of the reasons for it. But there we go. That's the world we live in, and we have to work with.
Thank you.
And any other questions before I'm going to try and get this. I understand that there aren't too many folks who are deep in the weeds of financial assessments, but I'll briefly show you some of the elements that have brought to life a little bit in that initial opener, and then we'll move on to better care support, if that's okay. So I'm hoping you can all see, in this case, I've taken Coventry City Council, their implementation of better care finance, and I'm just going to log in and show you some of the bits and bobs that I just described there and help bring to life why this makes such a difference to the way that the council delivers financial assessments. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to log in. All of our products have a similar approach to identity. You can bring your own. Folks can use their social media credentials through Facebook and Google. Nothing is ever posted, of course. This is just an authentication route. There's a traditional email password approach to things. You can log in as a guest, which will then generate a reference number, which you can log back in with, and you can log in with a mobile phone. Keep an eye on that bottom, that login with PIN. I'll show you that in a second, but that relates to the advocacy access. But for now, I'm going to log in and use my Gmail account. This is my personal one. So I've now logged in. And I'm now into the dashboard. I'm going to jump there. There's a lot of information and support that's very carefully crafted when folks are accessing and using Better Care Finance, and a lot of that sat within this advice and information section. But if I go into the applications and assessments, I can now see my financial assessment form for adult social care, which I will drop into here. And here are a number of ones. I've done too many demos, I'm afraid, over the last few weeks and months. But here's one that I will continue with. I'm not going to bore you by filling in a whole of financial assessment form. It's not an insignificant piece of effort, and you don't want to watch me do that. But what I have done is created one which I'll jump into, and it'll take you right to the end of the form, and it'll show you one of the most important parts of what makes Better Care Finance a bit different. So I'm just going to continue with this assessment here. And this has taken me to page 12 of 12 of the financial assessment form. And this is the cost of care page. So for Coventry, they break down their care types into non-res and respite, and they break residential down into the first 4 weeks, weeks 5 to 12, and then 13 onwards. This is where each council is different, and the onboarding process for this shrink wraps it around your local setting. But there's the figure. So what used to take Kirklees 100 days, they're now at the point where the end user at the end of the form, once they've submitted it, they get, in fact, just before submission, they get the figure. In this particular case, I'm being told that my maximum contribution per week will be £308.54. And how does that happen? Well, if I just jump to the beginning of the form, I'll skip through a few sections just to bring this to life. So, yes.
Sorry to interrupt, just to check, the screen is not moving for me, but it may just be me. Oh, now it is, yeah. Now we see that.
Is that okay?
It's okay on my end, yeah.
Cool. So a few things here. So in Coventry's case, the first thing they want to know is about people acting on someone's behalf. As you'd expect of a modern application of this sort, it's responsive. So in this particular case, if I'm going to say that, for example, is there anyone acting in the capacity of a deputy, I'll say yes. I'll complete those relevant forms. You'll see those relevant fields, sorry. You'll see across this experience different blue and green boxes that provide very carefully scripted guidance and direction to the end user in terms of what they should be doing, including, for example, up here, watch this video for guidance on filling the form on someone else's behalf. That's one of the 20 animations. I'll show you one a little bit further on. But that's how this, the whole of this, the form is constructed. I'm just going to say no to this so I can move on. We move on to some personal details around me, all the right kind of validation you would expect. If I input my national insurance number incorrectly, it will stop me. It will check for important details around your age, because that has relation to your, in terms of calculating state pension and so on. And at the bottom of this page 2, we get to what we call our kind of mini declaration. And this then determines the kind of information and support and information that is required from the service user for the rest of the form. Now, at the moment, this is set to that saying I've got savings under 23,250, which of course is the threshold currently. But if, for example, I didn't wish to provide my financial details and arrange my own care from a council's perspective, it's important that you know that. If I do that, the entire form is grayed out and I jump straight to the end. And if I now jump, and this is how dynamic that cost of care page is. If I jump to page 12, I'm no longer paying 300 odd pounds. I'm now paying the full cost of my residential care or non-res care, and I submit that. And then you, the council, are made aware that that's the case. I'm just going to jump back now for the purposes of ensuring that I can demonstrate something. I'm going to go back to saying my savings are under 23,250. Most councils deal with partners in very different ways. Again, this is part of the shrink wrapping. So if I, depending on your setup, we can handle the way that you would take into account partners' income and assets in terms of the calculation. That's all part and parcel of how this is set up. If I scroll on to the next page now, in terms of people living with you, it's important to understand around dependent children and capturing all of their details, along with other people that live with you. They all can affect the cost of care and that precise calculation that follows. Income and benefits, of course, is really rather important in terms of establishing what savings or income someone's got. We're able to handle really complex logic around universal credit. Councils handle that quite differently. That's all part and parcel of the way that we do the calculations. It's important when it comes to kind of a kind of user experience perspective. When you're asking people for figures, they don't necessarily, they may have a statement, but the statement they have, it might be a weekly one, it might be a monthly one, it might be an annual one. Because we work out the maths down to the week, we don't expect everybody to know what their precise weekly figures are. And indeed, councils calculate weeks differently. Some of them count 52 weeks, some count 52.14, I think. I can't remember the exact, but that is how detailed this is. So when, for example, if I put in a figure for my state retirement pension, I can indicate whether or not it's the figure that I've got is weekly, fortnightly, 4 weekly, monthly or annually. It will then do the maths to work out the exact week figure for you. So all of these different, a huge number of different potential benefits and incomes that you may be capturing, all of this is, these are, if you like, this isn't a template. in the onboarding process, we work out precisely what the way that you do things in your local authority, and then capture that within the implementation. We're now on to capital. Now, in this particular case, I've set myself to having so savings of 12,000. I'm just going to adjust that here to 16,000, which takes me over the 14,000 threshold, which should have an impact on my capital tariff income. I'll bring you on to in a moment. We can handle shareholdings and joint shareholdings, all that good fun. We've got property and land that you own and rent. That's all captured here within the form. And now we've got the sale or transfer of property or capital or deprivation of assets. This is where I'm going to give you an example of how we use animations to help someone understand what's being asked of them and ensure that they complete the information correctly. So I'm hoping that I've set things correctly. So I'm just going to click on this. We'll get a slider that should pop out. And I'm just going to play you this. If you could just give me a little thumbs up, somebody, if hopefully the sound will be coming through.
Deprivation of assets or gifting is when you intentionally donate your valuables or money so they're not included in your financial assessment. Another example is giving away your home or selling it at a below market rate to a friend or family member. You should provide as much information as possible about any gifting to relatives, friends, or charities. If this was a deliberate deprivation of assets, we may process your financial assessment as if you still owned the items you gifted. There's no time limit for deprivation of assets, so you should include anything from as far back as you can remember.
So that's one of 20. That helps people understand what's being asked of them. If someone turned around to me and said, what's a deprivation of asset? I'll just glaze over. I think that's the case for many people who don't live and breathe the world of a financial assessment officer. So we use animations as a tool throughout this experience to help people complete the information right first time. And ultimately, what that leads to is reduced contact. That's ultimately, we want people to provide this information to be able to get the right answer without having to call you up. That's what's driving a lot of that. So that's deprivation of assets. We've got household expenditure. Sorry, I just saw a comment. Yeah, you probably have sort of comment from Jonathan there. We capture household expenditure and rent. Of course, that part that impacts on the maths. And then DREs. Now, DREs, councils do it quite differently, we've learned, in terms of how they capture them and how they affect the maths. Coventry go with a full kitchen sink approach. They listed every single potential DRE. There are built-in limits into the system. So someone might say, oh, I spend £200 on bed turning, but actually they might have a limit of £30 and then they'll apply that limit. All of that is captured as part of the onboarding. If the rule of thumb is, if you can describe the logic, we can capture it within the product. So there's Coventry's extensive list of DREs. I'll move on. There's a final additional information screen for any content and supporting information that may be relevant. And then we have a declaration, which will be typically captured. There are various ways in which we can capture that in terms of getting people to agree that the information is correct and up to date and so on. And then the final screen gives us the cost of care. Of course, I switched back to having savings under the 22,250. But if I show you, one of the important things about this isn't just the total figure, but it's how it's broken down. So if I click on the show breakdown for non-res care, that figure of £315.54 is driven from all of these different aspects of it in terms of gross income. Now, I changed the savings from 12 grand to 16, which then included the capital tariff. So that figure of 315 has changed in real time because of the way I changed my savings as we went through the form. But you get a full breakdown all the way through the details to enable, again, to reduce contact. If people understand how the costs are broken down and given the breakdown and information and support they need to understand what these different things are, it reduces contact. So there's my submitted, or my, sorry, there's my form all complete. So now as a service user, I'm ready to submit. So that's what I'm going to do. So if I just scroll down and submit this assessment, this has now been submitted to Coventry. It hasn't. This is their demonstration test harness that we're using here, but that has now been delivered into the back office network at Coventry. And this is the point that's important around evidence. So based on the specific information I supplied in the form, it's telling me that I need to provide these 5 pieces of evidence. And it's not just telling me what evidence I need to provide, it tells me precisely what is required from me in order to fulfill that, and then allows me to upload that evidence. Now, of course, you can flick over to your mobile phone. So for example, if I wanted to take some pictures on my phone, I could send that evidence list directly as a text message to my phone and start snapping away and then drive all of that content directly in. Or if I had images already on my laptop or tablet, I can upload those directly from here. And when they do that, importantly, this isn't just some random image file coming, it's tagged appropriately. So the actual document type is included in the file and the name, the details, so that when they arrive on your network, ability to be able to find the right piece of evidence to if you need to check it is really straightforward. So a lot of thought has gone into making this both user friendly from a service user perspective, but super important that it's actually really easy to use and interface with from an officer perspective as well. So that's the financial assessment and the submission. One of the important aspects I talked about briefly earlier was advocate support. So let's imagine that I was in the middle of the form and I was struggling, and maybe I called the council and said I'm on page 8 and looking at these DREs. I don't really understand what they are. I need a bit of help. If they called you up, you would say that's fine. Just go to your account and generate a PIN. And by generating that PIN, they could just say to you over the phone, read out that number, and then you would be able to log in. Because of course, until they submit the data, it's personal to them. They haven't given you their permission. So this is the way in which, from an information governance and security perspective, they can provide permission to enable you or friends or family to help them dive in real time into page 7 of the form and help complete that with them and with permission from that user, which expires after 24 hours or expires at the point that the user decides they want to take away that access. So if I delete that PIN, that's now been taken away. That looks like there's a lot that goes behind that, but ultimately what that allows is for that support to happen in real time within the digital product, keeping people there. And that's really very important indeed. So that's the advocate support. I touched on income maximization. So alongside this, one of the recommended pieces of content or that we tend to drive the user to is the ability to assess their finances and determine what benefits they should be applying for. Now, again, I'm not going to go through all of this right now. It'll be a little bit too dull to watch, but I've done an assessment already. We have an integration with an outfit called Entitled 2 that do an excellent job of keeping a finger on the pulse on all kind of national benefits and entitlements. And when you do that, it then passes a shopping list of benefits that you're entitled to that I'm not claiming. So in this particular case, I've done an assessment and it's given me this scenario that says, actually, you should be applying for council tax support, housing benefit and pension credit. And if I did, I would be better off by £707.51 per week. But not only do we say that's what you should do, it then gives you the ability and drives you to be able to apply for those things, but also highlights things that you might be entitled to. And this is where, for example, attendance allowance is important. So having done that assessment, it's established that I should probably apply for attendance allowance. So I'm going to click on that now. And rather than someone attempting to complete the horrendous PDF that you would otherwise have to do, we've taken the entire form and given it the same treatment that you would have seen in the financial assessment. All the support, the videos, the content that helps someone complete that successfully and gives them the best possible chance of a successful outcome. That's all. I won't go into it here, but that's all part and parcel of this Income Max module. But importantly, as well as guiding the service user through all of those things, we're then able to actually measure it. So I'm now in the admin console for Better Care. I can see all the applications. I can see a financial FCA is the financial assessment. We have different codes for each different of the forms. You get all the metrics for how someone has gone, how far they've gone through the process, whether or not they've received reminders, how far through, whether they've completed it and submitted it. But if I scroll down through the different, and there's an awful lot of data that you can then use here to be able to measure the impact and success of this as a deployment. But we're into the monetary gain. So literally, I mean, Kirklees Council and numerous other councils now have been using this for years, and they have unearthed millions of pounds that has got into the pockets of local people where they're getting the benefits they're entitled to. And you'll be able to track all of that through the reporting capability that sits within the admin console. That's not a capability that any council's ever had before, and stems from the original work that we did on the Better Off platform at Looking Local. So that's a very quick glimpse, I guess, at the income maximisation piece, but it's an important part of what councils are at least obliged to do under the Care Act. But actually, in the context, like I said, of the cost of living crisis, this part of the puzzle couldn't be more important. Okay, so that is a whistle-stop tour of Better Care Finance and the financial assessment and income maximisation. I can't see any other questions or hands up at the moment, so I'm going to jump back and talk briefly about Better Care support. So you recall back in 2017, we were asked to go and look at the financial assessment. We were also asked to look at the way that Kirklees Council were doing a care and support assessment. And the biggest problem they had, and I think this is probably mirrored at most councils, they just didn't have enough care professionals, social workers, to undertake the volume of care and support assessments that are required. So most have, and the latest figures from ADAS are really clear about the backlog that most councils face. They just can't get through it all. And of course, I haven't yet met a council that has been able to honestly put their hand up and say they're meeting the obligations under the Care Act for annual reviews. So there's a significant capacity issue. So the question was, could we develop a digital strength-based care and support assessment that's self-led, that allows someone to go through all 10 areas of the Care Act and complete a care and support assessment? And that's so when we started that, we didn't start with the view of we should build something. The first thing we wanted to do was see whether there was anything on the market. Well, there wasn't. And we did an initial discovery piece with Nottinghamshire County, I think it was Stockton-on-Tees and Kirklees, where we had a hunch that animations was the way to go, to bring to life the context that's required so someone can answer questions about what their care and support needs actually are. And when we did that, the response from users was overwhelming. We knew we were onto something. Now, at the time, we were focused on the financial assessment product, Better Care Finance, and developing that and getting that absolutely kind of ship shape back in 2016, 2017. But at the start of COVID, Coventry City Council, whose financial assessment you've just seen, they said to us, look, can we get cracking on this care and support assessment? They had exactly the same problem as Kirklees. And with COVID kicking in and no access to people's homes, they had to find a way in which they could turbocharge the delivery of care and support assessments. So we did what we often do now at Looking Local, is run a co-fund. And Coventry were first in line. They said they wanted to be involved and contribute to the development of this. Alongside them came Solihull, Medway, Oxfordshire, Lincolnshire and Dorset councils. So those 6 all put some money in the pot, and we then worked with their adult social care professionals, all of whom tackled a strength-based approach to a care and support assessment in slightly different ways, and got them to all convene around an approach that they could all agree on. And that wasn't a small task at all, but the result of that is better care support. It's the other side of the coin to better care finance. It's got over 40 animations in it that go through and help set context, and I'll show you those in a second. We can do the same integration with back office, as we've alluded to already, with better care finance and a commitment to all of that. And the business case is incredibly strong. So when we did the initial analysis at Kirklees back in 2017, it was costing £620 per person for a care and support assessment, i.e. a kind of traditional face-to-face, human-led, professional-led care and support assessment. So the numbers of people that you need to get to go through this to make that wash its feet is incredibly low. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you it, and you'll see a lot of similarities with better care finance, and that's because it's built on the same underlying infrastructure. So anyhow, so this is, I'm arriving on better care support. This is a demo site. There's some content on the front of this that's there to really kind of reinforce that strength-based approach, help set expectations about what's going to come. But what this also does as a product isn't just about capturing what someone's care and support needs are, but it's actually giving them information, advice and guidance that's specific to their responses, that enables them to live independently. And because for many cases, people who are going through this, they may not have eligible care needs. They may have care needs, but they're not eligible. So for a large number of people who are arriving on your front door, this is about giving them the information they need for themselves so they can go off and not be, be like they're not drawing on your resources where they're actually not going to get a package of care anyhow. So that's a key part of what better care support includes. So in this particular case, I'm going to begin my supported self-assessment. And in the same way that you saw for better care finance, we have the same approach to identity. In this particular case, again, I'll log in with my Google ID. And I'm going to start a new assessment. For those of you who are familiar with the Care Act, there are 10 areas of the Care Act. We simplify the language, make it far more accessible. So, for those who are professionals, the language is quite different, but that's not appropriate to service users. So we've gone to a lot of time and trouble to get the language right, so it can help someone complete the information and complete the assessment well. Now I'm going to pick one of these, so I'm going to pick getting dressed and choosing what clothes to wear. And as you'll see through this is a animation-driven experience. So what this does is tease up the user, helps them understand what's coming, ask a few questions so that they can then continue through this section around getting dressed and choosing what clothes to wear. So I'm going to hit play on this one.
In this section, we're looking at getting dressed and choosing what clothes to wear. Your early morning routine may involve changing into your day clothes. You're awake, dressed, and ready to face the day. Do you always feel like getting up and dressed each morning? Someone else may already help you when getting dressed and undressed, or you may need a carer's support in the future, or rely on handy pieces of equipment to make dressing easier. Are you able to dress and undress yourself? Think about the decisions you make about what to wear for the day and night. This may depend on the weather or the activities you're undertaking. Can you make decisions about what to wear? Now you're thinking about getting dressed and choosing what to wear. We've got some questions to ask you.
Okay. There are a lot of care and thought went into all of the animations. There's considerable variety of characters, ethnicities, impairments, shapes and sizes, and so on, to ensure that it's a very sort of inclusive set of animations. And from a accessibility perspective, all of ours, we don't rely on YouTube generated translations. We carefully have got closed captions on all of them, so that that can be delivered. And of course, there's all the translation widgets within YouTube to make that as accessible and useful as possible to the as broader audience as we can. So having set the scene around getting dressed and choosing what clothes to wear, I then continue to questions. And this model and this approach applies to all 10 areas of that are outlined on that initial dashboard. This is just one of them.
Guy, real quick, you've got a question from Omid in the chat.
Okay, so good question. So there's a lot we can share. It might be difficult to just cover that all here. So for example, Coventry, if we take the way they approach better care support, they see this as being the front door for everybody. So everybody goes through a better care support assessment, and then they triage those for whom, you know, who aren't going to get additional support from the council. And for those that are, where there may be an ongoing conversation to be had with the care professional, this turbocharges that initial conversation and relationship with them. So it's fair to say that on the financial assessment, which is being used now for over 6 years by multiple councils, there's a whole host of experience, and we often connect councils who are onboarding with this with others. So there's quite a community now of local authorities who are sharing their experience of how they ensure that this kind of technology lands well within the council with professionals. And the same is happening on better care support, although it's a relatively newer product. So the councils on board with that are the co-funders, along with Blackpool, who are one of the trailblazers. They've signed up to it. Walsall are just being onboarded on it right now. I'm trying to think who else is coming on board. There's a number of others, but basically we connect folk together so that there's that kind of maximum learning, if you like, if that makes sense. Paul, you asked a question: how are the products maintained? This is completely supported by Looking Local. There is no requirement other than determining the mechanism for us to around integration and how you want the data delivered to you in a way that is useful. All products are completely maintained by Looking Local. And for context there, if you take the financial assessment, we know that every year there are changes. There are national changes to rates, and there may well be local policy changes. The maintenance of that is all done by Looking Local. We have a very clear model of having a lead analyst and support analyst for every local authority that uses these products. And there's a kind of mechanism there to capture any of those changes, test them and implement them. Our support, there are no costs associated with that. That's all incorporated within the license. And all of these products, for those of you interested, are on G-Cloud. But there it is. We are not a supplier that sits and turns around and says, oh, support and maintenance is there's this extra cost here and there. That's not the way that we operate. Does that answer your question, Paul? Hopefully it does.
Yeah, that's really helpful. That's helpful, thanks.
We basically make sure it remains completely in lockstep with your local rules and policies at all times.
Got it.
Yeah. Okay, so jumping back to better care support, I'm going to answer a few questions that are going to help me complete my assessment. So how do you feel about getting dressed and choosing what clothes to wear? In this context, for now, I'm going to say that I need some help. And you'll notice these next sections, they relate to the animation you've just seen. So I need help to motivate me to get dressed each day. I need help to support to dress. I can tick any of these, and you'll notice that the bar at the top here is changing as I do. This is important because as they tick these different options, it then, if you like, dynamically changes the UX and enables a number of other animations to follow, and questions are asked of the service user. So for now, I'm just going to say I need support to dress and undress myself, and then I'm going to carry on. So having done that, I now get a video that helps me really start to think about the specifics that are important to me. So I'm going to play this one, and I'm going to switch on the closed captions and hit play.
If you're having difficulty getting yourself dressed and undressed, there are items that can help you avoid having to bend, stretch, or coordinate your movements. Many people find bending to reach their feet awkward, or causes them to lose balance. If you can't reach your feet easily, there are techniques and small aids to help you put on and take off socks, tights, underwear, trousers, and shoes. Some people prefer to buy easy-to-wear clothing with no fiddly fastenings. Do you have stiffness in your shoulders, or weakness in your arms, or pain in your fingers? Putting on some items of clothing can be quite some effort. Luckily, there are simple techniques and small pieces of equipment to help you. For example, it can help to dress your weaker side first, then undress your weaker side last. Swapping clothing with buttons for items with zips, or lace-up shoes for Velcro fastenings are alternative ways to make getting dressed and undressed easier for you.
Okay. So having seen that, now I then continue to some questions. Can you dress and undress yourself without someone else's help? I'm going to say I cannot. Do you think you benefit from equipment? So I'm going to say yes to that. And then I get a number of questions. Now, these have been very carefully scripted. This is where there was an awful lot of to and fro with the co-funding councils to get these questions right and in the right order. For now, I'm just going to put some dummy text in these for now. And say next. At this point now, I've completed that area, one of the 10 areas of the CARE Act, this one around getting dressed and choosing what clothes to wear. And because this is a strength-based approach, so we don't force somebody to go through all 10 areas, and we don't dictate the order that they might choose to do that. They do the areas that they want to focus on, and that's really important. And then in order to be able to submit that, I need to complete some personal details. So for now, I'm just going to do the same. Put some dummy data in here. It's for speed.
Paul's asking typically how long it takes to deliver a Better Care Finance product for a council.
So the onboarding time for Better Care Finance is 16 weeks. That is a very careful, we have a very clear onboarding plan. The input required, so from you as a council, is important, but it's not onerous. What we're actually after are 1 or 2 people who are working at your at the coalface, who really know your local rules and policies. Our onboarding team will then work with them through initial kickoff workshop and then a number of iterations of the product to get it pin sharp to that pound and pence figure is absolutely spot on for all cases that are being tested and put through the system. So it's a 16-week start to finish, and we have a very clear plan. So if you want to see what that looks and feels like, we can follow up with you afterwards and take you through that. But it's a 16-week piece. Okay. Let's go into a number here. Bear with me as I go through this. I'm going to say that I'm widowed. And then, of course, for a care and support assessment, in the same way for a financial assessment, it's important to understand whether or not this is being done on behalf of someone else. If I say yes, I then ask some questions about who I am and my relationship to the person. For now, I'm going to say no to that. I'm going to save those details. And now at this point, I've completed one part of the care and support assessment and my personal details. So it will now allow me to submit that. So that's what I'm going to do. I get a summary screen of all the information that I've supplied. I could choose to go back if I wanted to change anything, but for now I'm going to carry on and submit that. That now delivers that as a bundle of content directly to the council. The messaging when the onboarding of better care support allows us to really personalize this kind of promise as to what comes next, and that speaks a little bit to the question that Omid you asked around how do you make this land and so on. But we wrap the messaging around what's important and how you want to utilize the product. Councils can approach this quite differently. Some want to provide it as an option. Some want to say, no, everybody goes through this route first. We can, how it's landed in that broader kind of pathway is very much part of the onboarding process. But having read this kind of confirmation screen, I'm going to continue to my dashboard. And now I can see all the assessments that I've created in the past. Here's the one that I've just most recently done today. And this is where the suggestions are important. So a large number of people who present at your front door who want a care and support assessment are not going to receive a package of care from you. So what we don't want to do is just leave them high and dry, because they will then continue to ask you questions. So part of the onboarding allows us to capture both national, we have a bunch of national assets, but also local ones. Now the ones in this demo are just national ones, but if I go into suggestions here, because, for example, I wanted to help with dressing aids, and this is offering some home help guidance. Alongside that, you'd have some really rich local signposting and content that we capture as part of the onboarding for better care support. That's driven alongside. So if you think about it like as a kind of information prescription to the user at the end of completing each and every care and support assessment that they might do, again, it can change over time because their needs and requirements may change over time. That's all part and parcel of better care support. And the information, when it's even without integration, when it's submitted, it automatically can send an email to a team email address saying there's a new assessment to look at, with a link that takes any member of the team back into better care support so they can review and determine what to do with that assessment. In the same way that you can with better care finance, you'll see the account is the same, and I can generate that PIN and get that advocacy support and help for me to go through the care and support assessment in exactly the same way as you can on better care finance. And that kind of approach, if you like, to from handling users and supporting them is completely consistent, and that's why they're two sides of the same coin. Generates the PIN, can be rescinded at any time the normal way. So that's a kind of whistle-stop tour through better care support. The onboarding time for better care support is slightly shorter. It's 12 weeks. But if you imagine that there are a bunch of councils who had intimate knowledge of both better care finance and better care support, and when the social care reforms were announced, they were saying, could we use the outputs from better care support to drive budgets? Because many councils struggle to provide consistent budgets. Now, in the context of the care reforms, of course, that was important because you had potentially a whole bunch of self-funders who needed a figure that they could then start to track their spend against towards their £86,000 cap. But if we leave the cap aside, it doesn't change the fact that for many councils, the capturing the volume of care and support assessments and then providing a consistent way to be able to generate a budget from that and potentially enable interface digitally with the service user around what both the budget is and importantly what is considered to be their eligible care needs, because we know that in the first 6 to 10 weeks of a care package being put in place, there's often a lot of change, and that change is hard to manage and expensive and resource intensive. So we basically decided to tackle the care cap account, but all of the budgeting piece through the development of what we now call Better Care Account. So we sent a message out to directors about social care about 6 months or so ago, saying who wants to be involved in this particular project. And Halton, Lincolnshire, Kirklees, Enfield and Walsall all put their hands up to be part of this kind of development of an MVP. And alongside that, to be honest, the number of hands that went up at that time was a great deal more than 5. And in fact, our gallery is now, I think, over 45 councils across the country involved. I know there are a number of London councils who are in the gallery. Now, the outputs of this project, and the ability to generate those budgets and so on, we have a webinar that is scheduled for next Tuesday, the 6th of December, where we're going to be showing all of this, the timeline for delivery of all of this new capability on the back of Better Care support is, as you can see on the screen there, everything is bang on target at the moment, and the decision around the kicking down the road of the care reforms from our perspective didn't change a thing, because there is still this underlying challenge for most councils around the ability to handle the volume of care and support assessments and then the consistent generation of associated budgets. And there's some really interesting potential that we're now unearthing through this project around how we might be able to use it as a tool for forecasting and spend of local authorities if they change some of their rules and so on. So the ability to change some valves, if you like, and predict what that means for your cohort of the people that you provide care packages to. That's what we're going to be talking to and showing and demonstrating next Tuesday. So if you've not signed up or not part of the gallery, that's fine. If you would like an invite to come along, I know that there are certainly some folk from London coming, but I'm not sure how many from this particular group are on today, whether either aware of it or signed up. But if you'd like to be invited to see where that's going, can you just pop your thumbs up or something in the chat, and Bart will ensure that you get an invitation to it, or in fact we can extend the invitation through you again, if that's helpful, to ensure that folks are welcome to attend. That's next Tuesday. Bart, do you know the time next Tuesday that's offhand? I can't recall the exact
It will
time.
be starting at 10 to 12.
10 to 12 on Tuesday, the 6th of December. And that will be a Teams webinar, a bit like this.
Guy, we can share that alongside the demo and slides with everyone if there's a link or something like that.
Cool. Yeah, we'll get that across to you. So we had, there's a 2-hour slot. That I didn't want to take more of your time than I know time is going to be precious. That's a swift overview of our approach to a self-led digital financial assessment and the associated care and support assessment. And it's the combination of those two things that is linked together through this new Better Care Account. And Better Care Account will incorporate the potential for generating consistent budgets for everybody who presents at your front door for the needs for a care and support assessment. So that's what we'll show you if you're interested next week. But at this stage, any questions at all from folks around what you've seen, or anything I may not have addressed? Not see any hands up. Stunned silence. Oh, there's a hand up there. Who's that? Omid.
Guy. This looks amazing, to be honest. So I've got two questions, if I may.
Mhm.
What's kind of hidden away that isn't so good, but through the experience of deployment that you would sort of candidly be able to share with us?
Yeah.
That's one question. And second of all, I've got a sort of scaling concern, given the, you know, the numbers of councils that will want to get involved in this because it does look amazing. What's the sort of capability from Looking Local to be able to scale to support the likely demand that's going to come?
Yeah. Okay, so candid response on deployment and so on. So there are examples of councils. So Kirklees took a view that they had to provide a excellent self-led user experience, and in doing so, they switched off other ways of being able to do stuff. I.e., no more pieces of paper being sent out, no more PDFs, no more emails, no more toing and fro. Everything would be done through Better Care Finance. Now, not every council so far has taken that view, and of course, what that leads to is people kind of the service users will follow the old paths, if you like, unless they're forced to change. So, in our experience, this product is good enough to be able to say no, there's no other way through. But that takes a kind of that's a bold decision for some councils, and it's not one that everyone has made so far. So I think there is an element of trying to work out how much you really want to make that shift, and then getting behind it. The effort has gone into ensuring that the product is fit for purpose for doing so. But that's where I think some of that kind of sharing and learning from others, and us operating like a co-op of, Kirklees Council are no different. It wasn't straightforward to begin with to do it. We've got some fantastic take-up stats now. And we've also learned that deploying a product of this sort is really hard, right? The financial assessment, no one else does it because it's blooming hard. And I think that the margins for the accesses and the, Controc have got their OFA, but I haven't yet met a council that says it's any good. I won't name them, but one of the other councils said they've had it for 7 years, doesn't work, and ultimately they're now looking at an RPA approach to getting the output from Better Care Finance into their billing systems. So, and I think it's probably fair to say that on the care and support front, again, there's a hearts and minds that needs to be won from care professionals, for whom, of course, there is no. Digital is great, but it's not going to be as good as a human. But there just aren't enough humans about, and there's not enough in the tank to pay for them, even if we could find them. So there's an element of having to sort of bring that cohort along. I was talking to Cambridgeshire and Peterborough yesterday, who've just commissioned Better Care Finance for both councils, and they're proceeding with Better Care Support. Actually, they were saying that their care professionals, like, we can't cope, we are at breaking point. We have to have a decent, proper digital alternative. So they're, in that particular case, they're saying they're all, they're chomping at the bit, but I don't think that's the picture everywhere. So I think that is another area where, just dumping the technology in and going, there you go, that isn't going to work. It needs, but we work, that's part of the support and help that we're looking to provide, not just sort of saying, oh, go and talk to Coventry or go and talk to Medway or so on, but we've learned ourselves how that can help. So this is what we're not in the business of doing, is just switching on some tech and going, over to you. This is a carefully supported piece. And then speaking to your second question around capacity, well, our world has changed enormously in the last 18 months in terms of demand. We saw it coming, and we've recruited. So joining the team, we've had, I think, 3 or 4 new analysts who come from a financial assessment background. So that's the heavy lifting on the financial assessment front. We now have a broader team and the engineering wallop. So we've done, again, some recruitment around that over the last 18 months because we saw this coming. So right now we are very busy, but we are we have a reputation that I'm very proud of to deliver, and don't plan to change that. So does that answer your question? I'm not sure. Yeah, we right now we have the capacity. We know that there's going to be more. There's going to be a lot of work to do next year, but it's taken 6 years to really finesse how you implement and land this kind of technology, especially the financial assessment piece. And we know what we're doing now. So I'm confident that, you know, as others need and want to deploy it, we've got the capability to do so.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Cool. Anyone else with any questions at all? Oh, okay. Well, look, if unless there's any other questions, then we will we'll ensure that anybody who wants to gets the invite to next Tuesday. There's some really. I was going to try and demonstrate some of it to you today. I won't do a good enough job. The folks and the team who are at the, you know, in the detail, they will be presenting this on Tuesday, and they'll do it justice. So I was tempted to show it to you. It's really good. But come along next Tuesday and see for yourself, and you know, work out for yourself whether the direction of travel that thing is going in is going to be useful to you. But in the meantime, I think again, so you've got my details. If anybody wants to follow up, in most cases, we tend to do I've done the sort of demos today, but they're actually, you know, our product owners for each of these products who are busy running workshops today for implementing a couple of local authorities right now. I think it's, in fact, I think it's Cambridgeshire and Peterborough having their kickoff today. We can do a kind of deep dive into this, and my guess is that, for example, from a financial assessment or care and support assessment perspective, there will be other people in your organisation that need to be able to see it and also have a good old poke and prod around how it came about and what it can do and how it does it and so on. So if you want a local show and tell for your teams, then again, please just shout and we can get that teed up and moving forward, so you can make kind of informed decisions about what you do or don't want to do.